Hi, this is Jordan Pickering at RNN Group. This is one of the sessions that we delivered on incremental progress. This is just a 10-minute video just going over the key points and requirements in order to ensure we are incorporating incremental progress throughout our delivery. So where the session started is we just did a list of different types of methods you use to measure progress. And from the session, there was a number of ways in which it was identified, whether it was on trackers, whether it was the CERT tracker, whether it was Pro Monitor, KSB reviews, there was plenty. But ultimately what the question was, or what the answer we were looking for is this, is the so what. So we've got lots of ways in which we measure learners' progress, but ultimately if the learners don't know it and don't know their progress, we're doing all this work and it's having little to no impact. So ultimately we've got to make sure that any ways that we are measuring learning is it's meaningful for the learners as well. So that's kind of why we did that to start off with, just to give you a bit of an idea. So ultimately, as we said there, our jobs is to understand the distance traveled for learners from their starting points. We just need to ensure that it's meaningful and progress is generally useful, because ultimately if the learners don't understand the why, then why are we doing it from there? So it might be that we have all these multiple ways in which we are measuring progress for these learners, but what information do the learners actually need from them types of ways in which we're measuring that progress? So those were the intentions, and this is what we wanted to ensure that everybody who's been on the session gets a better understanding of. And again, how to incremental progress and how it underpins excellent TLA using the RNM way, for example, or it is part of the RNM way. Exploring how to use adaptive practice, recognizing critical importance of addressing misconceptions before moving on, and how that has an impact on the session as well. And then reflecting on our own practice and seeing what changes that we'd actually make in order to ensure that incremental progress is happening, not only within one sessions, but over a period of time. So we talked about what is incremental progress, and this is what people had agreed what incremental progress is. It's gradual mastery. So actually moving from a novice to expert. We're looking at cognitive science. So we need to be taking into consideration how dual coding might work, ways in which that we can support learning to take place. So learners get a better understanding. It moves into long-term memory stores. How have we blocked the learning to ensure that that helps? So that, again, it links to the chunking aspect to that. And then how can we prevent overload? But ultimately, what we want people to do from a resilience standpoint is focus on progress rather than being concerned whether they've passed or failed. It's more about the development and understanding what elements they need to work on to get even better, or what fundamentally knowing what they're currently good at as well. So we kind of looked at this I do aspect of it. So the teacher modeling, used an image just to support it. And we did a little bit of a task relating back to this, which I'll show you in a second. But basically we were going to do a task. We did a task, and then it was for their decision to decide on where they base themselves on. So from this task that they did, were they a novice? Were they advanced beginner? Were they competent? Were they proficient? Or were they an expert? So using that information. So what we did is we did a do now activity, which relates to this video that's going to be played. Just to show you. When it does decide to play. Anyway, so what we did is we did a step-by-step video on how to make an origami paper butterfly, and it was a 5-minute video. But what I gave people the opportunity to do is gave people the opportunity to watch that video twice. So rather than doing it in 5 minutes, we did it in 10 minutes. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to do a task where you could see different people's skill set of where they were at in relation to this particular task. So we could identify from that grid where they were basically at. So just to show you. Okay. So that was the video. So Looking onto this, what we did is gave them a set of slides or set of sheets to complete, because ultimately what we found is when we did the activities, somebody might have done an amazing origami butterfly and said, "Oh, I'm not very good there. I think I could have been better at that." And we had some that weren't quite as neat or quite as well designed and laid out and followed the instructions correctly or appropriately, still saying that they were at the same level. So what we tried to say about incremental progress is there does need to be some guidance in relation to what is constitutes as a novice and what constitutes as an expert and where you'd range them. So it's giving them, this section here was about giving them tools to support that. So we gave a handout sheet. There was 3 varied versions of it. So one was to do with grading themselves from 1 to 10. One was sentence starters in relation to, I can do this because of this. We did it like a levels aspect of it. So where would you range yourself between level 1 and level 5? But each section had a bit of explanation in relation to what they could and couldn't do. What was interesting, there was like a certain point where it was to refold it back in, like an X fold, I think it was called. And staff were able to say, oh, that was the point, and this was the point. So I could do level 1, I could do level 2, got stuck on level 3. So then it was the questions about how could you work on that. We spoke about resilience as well, because ultimately what we need to ensure is that we do offer failure, and we're offering safe spaces for people to fail, because that's where most learning takes part. Some staff members found it a challenge. They found it something, oh, I don't want to do that, and automatically feeling like they needed to switch off. But the real positives is that everybody took part and engaged in it. But the key question there as well is where we're building that resilience is how did they get themselves back on track? How did they regulate themselves? Was it a walk away? Was it a bit more just like I'll focus on my own stuff? Was it breathing techniques? But ultimately, it was something in there that just actually, right, it's not my favorite task, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a go anyway. So it's giving it, again, building those tools and thinking about what activities that will incorporate that. Because like we're talking about incremental progress, a lot of the time we focus on the academic standpoint of it, of how are they progressing on their qualification, but ensuring we're looking at the wider aspects of it as well in relation to emotional control, being able to work in groups, that personal development as well, not just the professional aspect of it. So this is kind of what we were talking about here. To ensure learners can reflect, they've got to gather insights. So they've got to do something, they've got to analyze it, might engage in reflective discussion, whether that's with yourselves or with peers. And they might integrate reflection into practice. So what we said there is what could they have done better, then going away and trying to practice that differently in order to make sure that it worked and it had an impact. And again, making plans in order to develop and grow. So if it was like I'm going to try and develop this X fold and have it sufficient within 6 weeks. So we've got plans in place in order to develop. So like we said, next steps for people, it was now give learners the time to reflect. We appreciate there's a lot of information that you feel that you need to deliver in relation to your qualifications and programs, but we need to ensure that we're giving learners pause points. And the reason for giving pause points is it ultimately gives time for people to reflect, analyze, develop. If we just keep giving learners things to do, it's great, it keeps them busy, but ultimately we need them pause points to actually say, what is it that I did do really well on? What is it I needed to work on? Because ultimately these are skills that we don't necessarily develop at a younger age, but if we get them into the practice of doing that, they should get better at that reflective practice and identifying clearly what they need to work on, as well as what elements that they're very good at as well. Okay. So one of the last questions as well was, if we're going to put reflection into action, how are we going to plan this? What are you going to do? And one of the things that we did offer, which is in the Google Classroom anyway, all the materials are in there so you can access them, so you can see what we're talking about, is a learner journal. So we looked at a learner journal, opportunities, right? Okay, you've done a task, pause point, what was the task? what was the challenges, what went well, what could we have done better, what are your next steps to develop and grow. But ultimately, you can see the development of that learner by using a learner journal. And again, when we've mentioned this within sessions, it's not been a case of we're saying something absolutely that's new and out there. This is quite an old process, having a learner journal. The only difference is that we've made it digital. But like I said, we've got to give learners the opportunity to reflect. And if we're giving learners opportunity to reflect, they should be able to analyze and develop. So one of the last things we're currently looking at as well is, from some of the activities that we did, from some of the task sheets that people are allowed to, that people did as well, not allowed to do, but what people did, which method did they like, and then have a bit of reflection and a pause point for tutors and assessors and job coaches and things like that. So looking at what we've done, what would it be that you might try? What things might you might refine that you think might need tweaking, or is there anything that you might need to ditch in your current delivery model? But ultimately, it's just giving you the opportunity to think about how can we incorporate incremental progress throughout each session that we deliver. And that was the session. Okay. So again, if you want to take part in the activity, you can do, that's fine. All the materials are in the Google Classroom. And if there is anything else that you need, please don't hesitate to contact, and we'll try and go over this in more detail. If you're wanting some support, advice and guidance, that's our jobs, and that's what we want to here to do to help you out.